A first-class cabin 30,000 feet in the air became the stage for an unforgivable act. On Orion Air's flagship, Flight 77, from London to New York, senior flight attendant Karen Miller was the queen of her domain. Dr. Evelyn Reed, 6 months pregnant, and a brilliant cardiologist was just another passenger, but a clash of prejudice and pride would soon ignite a firestorm. It began with a condescending remark and escalated into a shocking moment of violence, a slap that echoed through the silent cabin. But Karen Miller had made a catastrophic mistake. She didn't just assault a passenger, she assaulted the one woman whose secret could bring the entire airline and Karen's own world crashing down to earth. The cabin of Orion Air Flight 77 was a study in sterile luxury. The scent of worn leather and expensive citrus-based cleaning solution hung in the air, a perfume designed to soothe the anxieties of transatlantic travel. For Dr. Evelyn Reed, settling into seat 2A, the soothing wasn't quite working. At 6 months pregnant, every journey was a calculated risk, a negotiation between her professional duties and the burgeoning life within her. She was returning from a cardiology conference in London, where she'd been a keynote speaker, her mind still buzzing with advanced surgical techniques and the promising data from a new statin trial. Evelyn was a woman of quiet, formidable presence. Her intelligence shone in her dark, observant eyes, and she carried herself with the unforced poise of someone who had earned her place in the world through sheer grit and brilliance. Today, however, she was just a tired, pregnant woman who wanted nothing more than to be home in her own bed in New York, next to her husband, Marcus. The flight attendants moved through the first-class cabin with practiced efficiency. Among them, one stood out for her severe blonde bob and a smile that never quite reached her pale blue eyes. This was Karen Miller. At 48, Karen was a veteran of the skies, a senior purser who had seen the airline industry evolve from glamorous to grueling. She wore her authority like a second skin, her movements sharp and economical. She saw the first-class cabin not as a space of luxury for her guests, but as her personal stage where she was the director-producer and star. Her gaze swept over the passengers, cataloguing them with years of honed judgment. The tech bro in 3B already barking into his phone. The aging actress in 1A hiding behind oversized sunglasses. And then her eyes landed on Evelyn in 2A. Karen's smile tightened infinitesimally. She saw a black woman, young in a seat that cost more than her monthly mortgage payment. An assumption ugly and instantaneous clicked into place in her mind. Probably a rapper's girlfriend, or some influencer who got lucky. She thought the Prejudice a familiar, bitter taste. Evelyn, sensing the stare, offered a polite, weary smile. "Could I please get a pillow for my back? And perhaps a bottle of still water?" Karen's response was a fraction too slow, her voice dripping with a saccharine condescension that was far more insulting than outright rudeness. "Of course, dear. We'll get you all settled in. You must be exhausted." The word dear was deployed like a tiny poisoned dart. Evelyn's smile didn't waver, but her eyes narrowed slightly. She recognized the tone instantly. It was the same tone used by administrators who questioned her credentials, the same tone from older nurses who bristled at taking orders from a young black doctor. It was the soft, smothering blanket of casual racism. "Thank you," Evelyn replied, her voice even and professional. "A pillow would be a great help." Karen turned away with a flick of her wrist, moving to another passenger and laughing at a joke, making Evelyn wait. It was a small power play, a subtle act of dismissal meant to put Evelyn in her place. 10 minutes passed. The plane was finishing boarding. Evelyn's back was beginning to ache. She noticed Karen serving champagne to the man in 2C, so she gently tried to get her attention again. "Excuse me, Mom. Just a reminder about the pillow when you have a moment." Karen turned her face, a mask of feigned surprise. "Oh, I'm so sorry, it completely slipped my mind. We're just so terribly busy before takeoff." She gestured vaguely around the half-full first-class cabin. It was a lie, and they both knew it. She returned a few minutes later, not with a pillow, but with a thin, flimsy blanket. "Here you are. This should do." "I asked for a pillow," Evelyn stated, not unkindly, but firmly. "This blanket won't provide the support I need for my back." Karen's professional veneer began to crack. "Well, the pillows are for sleeping, and we haven't reached cruising altitude yet. Policy is quite strict. Just fold this up." Evelyn knew this was nonsense. She had flown this route dozens of times. "I'm a doctor, and I'm 6 months pregnant," she explained, her voice low and steady, trying to de-escalate. "It's a medical necessity for lumbar support to prevent pain and complications. I'm sure you can understand." The mention of her being a doctor seemed to flick a switch in Karen. The resentment in her eyes flared. "Everyone's a doctor or a lawyer in first class." She sniffed her voice, now losing its false sweetness. "And everyone has a special problem. If I make an exception for you, I have to make one for everyone." The man in 2C, a lawyer named David Chen, looked up from his newspaper, a frown creasing his brow. He could feel the tension, the sheer unprofessionalism radiating from the flight attendant. Evelyn took a deep breath, fighting the surge of frustration. She was too tired for this. "It's not an exception. It's a reasonable accommodation. I just need a simple pillow." And I said, Karen said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper, "that you will have to wait. Now I have other paying customers to attend to." The insult was clear, the implication hanging in the air like toxic fumes. "You're not a real paying customer. You don't belong here." Evelyn simply stared at her, a profound sadness mixing with her fatigue. She wouldn't argue. She wouldn't be dragged down to that level. She would wait. But she also wouldn't forget. The flight had barely begun, but deep in the gilded cage of first class, the battle lines had already been drawn. The plane ascended into the deep blue twilight, leaving the coast of England behind. Below, a blanket of clouds obscured the world, creating a sense of isolation. Inside the cabin, a fragile peace settled as the dinner service began. Evelyn tried to make herself comfortable, folding the thin blanket into a makeshift roll behind her back. It was barely effective, and a dull ache was already spreading across her lower spine. She tried to focus on the in-flight movie to lose herself in a world of fiction, but her encounter with Karen Miller had left a sour taste in her mouth. It was the wearying nature of it all, the constant need to prove her worth, to justify her presence in spaces where others were welcomed without question. Karen, for her part, moved through the cabin with a renewed sense of purpose. Having in her mind successfully put the woman in 2A in her place, she was all smiles and attentiveness to the other passengers. She topped up champagne glasses, laughed at stale jokes, and offered extra dessert with a flourish. Her performance was impeccable, a carefully constructed facade of premium service that only highlighted her earlier hostility toward Evelyn. When it was time to serve Evelyn's pre-ordered meal, Karen placed the tray down with a little too much force, causing the water glass to slosh. "Careful there," she said, a hint of accusation in her tone, as if Evelyn were the clumsy one. Evelyn simply replied, "Thank you," and began to eat. She had ordered a simple grilled salmon with vegetables, a healthy choice for her and the baby. Halfway through the meal, the plane hit a patch of unexpected turbulence. It wasn't severe, just a series of jarring bumps that sent a tremor through the fuselage. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and reassuring, advising passengers to remain seated. During one particularly sharp lurch, Evelyn's hand bumped her water glass. A small amount of water, no more than a few tablespoons, spilled onto her tray and a tiny bit onto the plush carpet below. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Karen hissed, appearing at her side almost instantly, a look of pure fury on her face. She held a cloth napkin like a weapon. "Now look at the mess you've made. This is exactly why we ask passengers to be careful." The accusation was so absurd, so disproportionate to the minor spill, that Evelyn was momentarily speechless. "It was the turbulence," she said calmly. "It was an accident." "It's always an accident," Karen sneered, dabbing aggressively at the tray. Her knuckles were white. "Some people just don't have any consideration. This is Italian leather. The carpets are custom-woven wool. These things cost a fortune." David Chen in 2C finally lowered his newspaper. "That's enough," he said, his voice quiet, but carrying an unmistakable authority. "It was the turbulence. I saw the whole thing. There's no need to speak to the passenger that way." Karen shot him a venomous look. "Sir, with all due respect, this is my section, and I will handle it." She turned her ire back to Evelyn. "You should have been holding your glass." "It's common sense." Evelyn felt a hot flash of anger, but she pushed it down, thinking of her blood pressure of the baby. "I apologize for the spill," she said, her voice tight with restraint. "It was not intentional. Could you please just bring me another napkin?" This attempt at civility seemed to enrage Karen even further. It was as if Evelyn's composure was a personal affront to her authority. This calm, educated black woman was refusing to be intimidated, refusing to be rattled. In Karen's twisted worldview, Evelyn wasn't behaving as she was supposed to. "We don't just have an endless supply of napkins for people who can't manage a simple glass of water," Karen snapped. The pretense was gone. This was pure, unadulterated hostility. Her face was inches from Evelyn's. "That is a completely inappropriate thing to say," Evelyn said, her voice now sharp and cold. She was no longer just a pregnant woman. She was Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman who commanded respect in operating rooms and boardrooms. "I am a first-class passenger, and I expect to be treated with a basic level of professional courtesy. Your behavior since I stepped on this plane has been unacceptable." The cabin had grown quiet. The other passengers were now openly staring their movie screens forgotten. They were witnessing something far more compelling than any Hollywood drama. They were watching a woman unravel. "Unacceptable!" Karen let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I'll tell you what's unacceptable. People like you waltzing in here thinking you own the place, making demands, making messes, and then playing the victim when you're called out on it." The words, "people like you," hung in the air thick and poisonous. There was no longer any ambiguity. It was a direct, targeted attack. Evelyn pushed her tray table away, the movement slow and deliberate. She needed space. She felt a protective instinct, her hands unconsciously going to her swollen belly. "I am asking you one last time to step away and send another flight attendant to my seat." Evelyn said, her voice dangerously low. "You are creating a hostile environment, and I will be filing a formal complaint against you with this airline and the FAA the moment we land." The threat, the mention of the FAA, should have been a warning shot, a reason for any sane employee to retreat and regroup. But Karen Miller was beyond reason. She felt cornered. Her authority challenged her prejudices, validated by Evelyn's refusal to cower. In that moment, all her life's disappointments, a stalled career, a messy divorce, mounting debts, coalesced into a single point of incandescent rage, and it was all directed at the calm, pregnant woman in seat 2A. "You will be filing nothing," Karen spat her face, contorted in a mask of ugly fury. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. And you Evelyn replied, her voice shaking slightly with adrenaline. "Clearly have no idea who you are." It was that last defiant statement that broke the final thread of Karen Miller's control. The air in the cabin crackled with a tension so thick it was almost suffocating. The low hum of the engines seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the sound of collective held breaths. Every eye in the first-class cabin was now fixed on the unfolding drama between seat 2A and the aisle. Karen Miller's face was flushed a blotchy, furious red. Evelyn's words, "You clearly have no idea who you are," had struck a nerve deep within her psyche, a place where her insecurities and resentments festered. To be spoken to with such finality, with such unshakable confidence by a woman she had already deemed unworthy, was the ultimate insult. Her training, her years of service, the thick manual of rules and regulations, all of it evaporated in a white-hot flash of pure, unthinking rage. "How dare you?" Karen whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could react, before Evelyn could even process the venom in that whisper, Karen's hand shot out. It wasn't a push or a shove. It was a full, open-palmed slap. The sound was shockingly loud in the enclosed space, a sharp, ugly crack that severed the last thread of civility. Evelyn's head snapped to the side from the force of the blow. A collective gasp rippled through the passengers. For a moment, there was just stunned silence. The only sounds were the hum of the Rolls-Royce engines and the sharp ringing in Evelyn's ear. Pain, sharp and stinging, bloomed across her cheek, but it was secondary to the profound shock, the utter disbelief that this was happening. 30,000 feet in the air, in the supposed sanctuary of a first-class cabin, she had been physically assaulted. Her first overwhelming instinct was not for herself, but for her child. Her hands flew to her belly, a protective shield, her mind racing with a doctor's clinical panic. Stress hormones. Adrenaline. "Is the baby okay?" From across the aisle, a young woman in her early 20s, a student vlogger named Chloe Jenkins, had been discreetly filming the escalating argument on her phone. She had started recording when Karen's voice had turned nasty, sensing it would be an outrageous Karen encounter for her social media. She never imagined she would capture a physical assault. Her finger trembling remained firmly on the record button. The lens was perfectly framed on Karen's furious face and Evelyn's stunned reaction. David Chen, the lawyer in 2C, was on his feet in an instant. "That's assault!" He boomed, his voice cutting through the shock. "You just assaulted a passenger, a pregnant passenger." The spell was broken. The cabin erupted. "Oh my God!" someone cried from the back. "What is wrong with you?" another passenger shouted at Karen. Karen Miller stood, frozen, her hand, still tingling, her eyes wide, with a dawning horror at what she had just done. The red haze of her anger was beginning to recede, replaced by the icy dread of consequence. She looked at her own hand as if it belonged to someone else. Just then, the cockpit door opened. Captain Evans, a tall, silver-haired man with a commander's presence, strode into the cabin, his first officer close behind. They had been alerted to a disturbance by another flight attendant who had wisely pressed the emergency call button. "What in God's name is going on out here?" Captain Evans demanded, his eyes scanning the scene, Evelyn holding her cheek, her other hand on her stomach. Karen, pale and trembling. David Chen standing in the aisle, pointing a finger at Karen. "Captain," David Chen said, his voice ringing with legal precision. "Your senior purser, Ms. Miller, just physically assaulted this passenger. She slapped her across the face. We are all witnesses. At least one person has it on video." Chloe Jenkins nervously held up her phone as proof. Captain Evans's face hardened into a mask of cold fury. He looked at Karen, his expression one of utter disbelief and disgust. "Ms. Miller, is this true?" Karen opened her mouth, But no words came out. She just stared, her world visibly collapsing in on itself. She tried to formulate a defense, a justification. She provoked me. She was aggressive. She was a threat. But the lies died on her lips as she looked at Evelyn's face, the red mark already forming on her beautiful skin, the look of profound, quiet shock in her eyes. She was being unruly. Karen stammered the word, sounding weak and pathetic even to her own ears. Unruly. Captain Evans shot back, his voice dangerously low. She looks terrified. You will go to the galley, and you will not speak to another passenger or crew member for the remainder of this flight. You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Do you understand me? Sobbing now a racking, desperate sound, Karen stumbled away toward the galley, escorted by another horrified flight attendant. Captain Evans knelt by Evelyn's seat. His entire demeanor softened. Ma'am, are you all right? I am so sorry. My name is Captain Evans. Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention? Evelyn finally looked up at him. Tears were silently streaming down her face, born not just of pain, but of humiliation and fear for her baby. I'm a doctor, she whispered, her voice hoarse. My cheek will be fine. I'm more concerned about the stress. I just need to be calm. I need to check my blood pressure when we land. Of course, the captain said, his voice full of profound regret. We'll have paramedics meet the aircraft at the gate. We will also have airport security present to take your statement and detain Miss Miller. Whatever you need, whatever you want, you have my word, we will provide it. This is the most egregious failure of professional conduct I have witnessed in my 30 years of flying. Evelyn nodded numbly, her hand never leaving her stomach. She could feel the frantic thumping of her own heart and prayed her baby couldn't. The slap itself was a fleeting moment of pain. But the violation, the public humiliation, and the sheer racist ugliness of it all would linger for far, far longer. The flight continued its journey westward, but for everyone in that first-class cabin, the world had been irrevocably altered. The descent into John F. Kennedy International Airport was tense and silent. The remaining flight attendants, their faces pale with shock and embarrassment, moved through the cabin with quiet, apologetic deference. No one spoke. The incident had sucked all the air out of the gilded cage. As promised, the moment the jet bridge connected to the aircraft, Captain Evans's voice came over the intercom, requesting all passengers to remain seated. A team of Port Authority police officers and 2 paramedics came on board. They made a beeline for seat 2A. Evelyn, with the composure that defined her, calmly explained what happened to the officers, her voice steady, despite the tremor she felt inside. The paramedics gently examined her, checking her vitals. Her blood pressure was elevated, as she suspected, but not dangerously so. The red mark on her cheek was now a vivid, angry welt. As she was giving her statement, David Chen approached. Dr. Reed, he said softly, handing her a business card. David Chen, I'm a partner at Sullivan & Cromwell. What you experienced was not just unprofessional. It was assault and a clear violation of your civil rights. I and several other passengers are prepared to give witness statements. When you're ready, you should seek legal counsel. The airline will try to make this go away quietly. Evelyn took the card, her mind clearing, the fog of shock beginning to dissipate. Thank you, Mr. Chen. I appreciate that more than you know. Chloe Jenkins, the young vlogger, also came forward, her eyes wide. I have the whole thing on video, Dr. Reed. It's crystal clear. I won't post it or do anything with it until you tell me. It's your story. Thank you, Chloe, Evelyn said, managing a small, grateful smile. Hold on to it for now. After giving their preliminary statements, the police escorted a now hysterical Karen Miller off the plane in handcuffs. Her professional pride was stripped away. Her severe bob dishevelled her face, streaked with tears and running mascara. It was a pathetic, ignominious end to her career. Evelyn was the last passenger to deplane, accompanied by the paramedics and Captain Evans, who personally saw her to a private lounge the airline had arranged. He reiterated his apologies, assuring her that the full weight of the corporation would be brought to bear on this matter. Left alone in the quiet, sterile lounge, the adrenaline finally ebbed away, leaving behind a profound exhaustion and a deep, aching sadness. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were trembling as she scrolled to her husband's name, Marcus. She pressed the call button. He answered on the first ring, his voice warm and full of love. "Hey, my love. Your flight landed early. I was just about to head to the airport. Is everything okay?" Evelyn opened her mouth to speak, but what came out was a choked sob. All the control, all the composure she had maintained for hours finally broke. "Evelyn, honey, what is it? What's wrong?" Marcus's voice sharpened instantly with concern. He knew his wife. She was the calm in any storm. For her to cry like this, something had to be terribly wrong. "Marcus," she managed to say between sobs. "Something happened on the flight. I'm okay. The baby is okay, I think. But a flight attendant. She hit me." The line went dead silent for 3 full seconds. It was a silence so complete, so heavy, it felt like the pressure in a deep ocean trench. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was transformed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something terrifyingly cold, a controlled glacial rage. "She did what—" "She slapped me, Marcus, in front of everyone." Evelyn recounted the entire story, from the condescending remarks about the pillow to the spill and the final violent confrontation. Marcus listened without interruption. He didn't ask clarifying questions. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He was absorbing every detail, every nuance of the humiliation and abuse his wife had endured. He was processing it, and in the calculating, brilliant mind of Marcus Thorne, gears were beginning to turn with lethal precision. "What is the flight attendant's name?" he asked, his voice flat. "Karen Miller," Evelyn said. "Flight 77 from Heathrow." "I see," he said. "Are you with the police now?" "I've given a statement. I'm in a private lounge at the terminal." "Don't move," he commanded, the tone leaving no room for argument. "Don't talk to anyone else from the airline. I'm sending my personal security team to you right now. They'll be there in 15 minutes. They will escort you to our own doctor for a full checkup, then bring you home. I'll meet you there. I have to make a phone call." "Marcus, what are you going to do?" she asked, a little frightened by the cold fury in his voice. "I'm going to take care of it," he said. And with that, he hung up. Marcus Thorne stood in his penthouse office overlooking Central Park. He was not just a wealthy husband. He was Marcus Thorne, the founder and majority shareholder of the Thorne Capital Group, a multi-billion-dollar private equity firm. And among the many companies his firm owned, the crown jewel, his personal passion project, that he had bought out of near bankruptcy and rebuilt into a global powerhouse, was a luxury airline. The airline was called Orion Air. He picked up his other phone, the one with the encrypted lines, and dialed a number from memory. It was the private line of Robert Jennings, the hand-picked CEO of Orion Air. Jennings answered immediately. "Marcus, to what do I owe the pleasure?" There was no pleasure in Marcus's voice. "Robert, I have just been informed of an incident on Flight 77 from London. A first-class passenger, a pregnant woman, was physically assaulted by a senior purser named Karen Miller." Jennings's blood ran cold. "My God, Marcus, I haven't seen the report yet. That's unthinkable. We'll launch an immediate investigation. We'll fire the employee, of course. We'll offer the passenger compensation, a lifetime of free flights, whatever it takes to—" Marcus cut him off. His voice was as soft as silk and as sharp as a razor. "You don't seem to understand, Robert. This isn't a customer service issue. This isn't a PR problem you can solve with a check. You need to listen to me very carefully." He paused, letting the weight of his silence fill the air. "The passenger's name," Marcus Thorne said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "is Dr. Evelyn Reed. She is my wife, and she is carrying my son." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. In that moment, Robert Jennings, the powerful CEO of a global airline, understood that he was no longer dealing with a corporate crisis. He was dealing with the wrath of an emperor whose queen had been harmed. The storm was just beginning. For Robert Jennings, the world tilted on its axis. He was standing in his sleek, minimalist office on the 50th floor, but he felt like he was in a free fall. Marcus Thorne's wife. The words echoed in his mind, a death knell for procedure and protocol. This wasn't about following the corporate playbook. This was about surviving the personal fury of the man who owned his entire world. "Get me Captain Evans now," Marcus's voice commanded, through the phone pulling Jennings from his paralysis. "And get me the head of security at JFK. I want every single witness statement from that cabin on my desk within the hour. I want the unedited video from the passenger who filmed it. I want a full psychological and performance review history of this Karen Miller. I don't want a summary. I want every file, every complaint to every commendation, everything." "Of course, Marcus." "Right away," Jennings stammered, already typing furiously on his computer barking orders to his assistant over the intercom. "And Robert," Marcus added, his voice chillingly calm, "suspend all public statements. No apologies, no explanations. We will control this narrative. The first word about this incident comes from us, and only when I say so. Is that clear?" "Crystal, Marcus." While Jennings scrambled, unleashing a hurricane of panicked commands through the Orion Air corporate structure, the video from Chloe Jenkins's phone was already beginning its insidious journey. Having given her contact information to Evelyn's security detail, she had been contacted by Marcus's legal team. Assured it was what Dr. Reed wanted, she had transferred the high-definition file. Within an hour, the 45-second clip was being viewed on a massive screen in Marcus Thorne's private boardroom. He watched it once, his face impassive, a marble statue of controlled rage. He watched Karen's condescending tone, her aggressive posture. He watched his wife's calm, dignified restraint. And then he watched the slap. The moment his wife's head snapped to the side, a muscle in his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might break. He pressed a button. "Play it again." They watched it 5 more times in complete silence. The only sound was the sickening crack of the slap, echoing in the acoustically perfect room. By morning, the corporate guillotine had been sharpened. Robert Jennings, looking as though he hadn't slept in a week, stood before Marcus in his office. "Karen Miller has been with us for 22 years. Jennings began reading from a file. "Her record is mixed. Several commendations for professionalism in emergencies, but also a string of minor passenger complaints over the past 5 years. Complaints of rudeness, abrasiveness, condescending attitude. 3 of them mention perceived racial bias, but they were dismissed by HR as unsubstantiated." "Dismissed by whom?" Marcus asked, not looking up from his own copy of the file. "A regional HR manager. He's no longer with the company." "Find him," Marcus said. "I want to know why he buried these complaints." The investigation was swift and brutal. Karen Miller, released on bail and facing criminal assault charges, was summoned to an emergency hearing at Orion Air headquarters. She arrived with a union representative, her face puffy from crying, but with a flicker of defiance still in her eyes. She believed the union and her long tenure would protect her. At worst, she thought it would be a long suspension without pay. She was wrong. She was led into a sterile boardroom, where Robert Jennings, the airline's chief legal counsel and the head of human resources, sat waiting. They didn't offer her a seat. "Ms. Miller," the chief counsel began, his voice devoid of any warmth. "We have reviewed the incident on Flight 77. We have video evidence testimony from 16 different witnesses, including the flight captain, and your own preliminary statement, which we have found to be deliberately misleading." The union rep started to speak, but the lawyer held up a hand. "Let me be clear. This is not a negotiation. Your actions constituted gross misconduct, a direct violation of FAA regulations regarding passenger safety and civil conduct, and a criminal act of assault. You endangered the welfare of a passenger and her unborn child. You have brought unimaginable disgrace upon this airline." Karen paled. "It was a stressful situation. She was provoking me. The video shows Dr. Reed behaving with a level of restraint that can only be described as superhuman." Jennings cut in his voice, dripping with ice. "You, on the other hand, engaged in a pattern of escalating hostility, rooted in what appears to be deep-seated prejudice." He slid a single piece of paper across the table. "This is your notice of immediate termination. Your employment with Orion Air is over-effective this second. Your flight benefits are revoked. Your pension is subject to forfeiture pending the outcome of the civil litigation that will be brought against you." "You can't do this," Karen shrieked, the reality crashing down on her. "I have rights. The union cannot and will not protect an employee who commits a violent crime against a customer." The union rep said quietly, his face grim. He had seen the video. There was no defense. "They're within their rights, Karen." She was then informed that Orion Air was fully cooperating with the district attorney's office. Furthermore, the company's legal team would be providing support for Dr. Reed's personal lawsuit against her. They weren't just firing her. They were actively helping to dismantle her life. Stunned and shaking, Karen was escorted from the building. As she stood on the curb, the glass doors hissing shut behind her, she realized she had been blacklisted. No other major airline would ever hire her. Her 22-year career was gone. Her life, as she knew it, was over. But Marcus Thorne was just getting started. He wasn't interested in just one employee. He was interested in the rot that had allowed an employee like her to fester in his company for 2 decades. The regional HR manager was found. The records were pulled. A full-scale top-to-bottom audit of the entire in-flight services department and human resources was launched. People were fired. Entire departments were restructured. New mandatory and rigorous anti-bias and de-escalation training programs designed by leading sociologists and psychologists were being drafted. He would rip his own company apart and rebuild it from the studs to ensure a person like Karen Miller could never again hold a position of power. The assault on his wife was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a disease, and Marcus Thorne was prepared to perform radical surgery. The weeks that followed the incident were a downward spiral for Karen Miller. Her name, once anonymous, became infamous. Marcus Thorne's PR team, with surgical precision, had controlled the story's release. They had given the exclusive to a single respected news outlet, complete with the video Chloe Jenkins had taken. The clip went viral overnight. It was played on every major news network, discussed on talk shows, and shared millions of times on social media. Slap at 3 out of 1,000 feet, and Fly High Karen trended for days. Karen's face was everywhere, a poster child for entitlement and racism. She became a pariah. Friends stopped calling. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid her. The vitriol of the internet poured into her life, a deluge of hate mail and threats. Her legal troubles mounted. The assault charge was moving forward, and her public defender offered little hope. The civil lawsuit filed by Evelyn Reed's lawyers was a behemoth, a multi-million-dollar claim for damages that she had no conceivable way of paying. Her savings, already meager, were evaporating with every legal consultation. She lost her apartment, unable to make rent, and was forced to move back into her aging mother's small suburban house in New Jersey, a house filled with the ghosts of her own failed ambitions. It was the ultimate humiliation. Her mother Eleanor was a frail woman in her late 70s, battling a complex and aggressive form of pulmonary fibrosis. Her world had shrunk to the confines of her small house, her life tethered to an oxygen tank. Karen's modest flight attendant salary had been just enough to cover the mortgage and her mother's ever-increasing medical bills and co-pays. Now that lifeline was gone. "I don't understand how this could happen, Karen." Eleanor would whisper, her breathing shallow and labored. "You were always such a good girl." Karen had no answers. She spent her days in a fog of self-pity and rage, replaying the incident on the plane over and over. In her mind, she was the victim. Dr. Evelyn Reed was a phantom, a symbol of everything she felt she had been denied. She never once considered the humanity of the woman she had struck. One crisp autumn afternoon, a certified letter arrived. It was from the specialist medical group that managed her mother's care. Karen ripped it open, her hands trembling. It was a final notice. Their insurance had denied coverage for a new experimental treatment, and their outstanding balance was now over $80,000. Without payment, they would have to discontinue Eleanor's specialized care. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Karen. This treatment was her mother's last hope. It wasn't a cure, but it could buy her months, maybe even another year or two of comfortable life. "What is it, dear?" Eleanor asked, seeing the look on her daughter's face. "It's nothing, Ma." Karen lied, stuffing the letter into her pocket. "Just junk mail." That night, she sat at the kitchen table, the unpaid bills spread out before her, like a losing hand of cards. Desperate, she remembered a conversation from months ago. Her mother's primary physician had mentioned one doctor, a name spoken with a kind of reverence, as the only person who could possibly help. He was a leading expert in interstitial lung disease, a pioneer whose research was changing the game. But he was nearly impossible to get an appointment with his waiting list years long. The physician had said there was one other person, his most brilliant protégé, who had recently joined the faculty at New York Presbyterian Hospital and was setting up a new clinical trial. This doctor was the key. With a surge of desperate hope, Karen logged onto her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. She found the hospital's website and the Department for Pulmonary Medicine. She scrolled through the faculty list, searching for the name of the protégé her mother's doctor had mentioned. And then she saw it. A professional headshot of a smiling, confident woman. The name was listed below in crisp black letters. Dr. Evelyn Reed, MD, PhD, attending Physician Advanced Lung Disease Program. Karen stared at the screen. The air left her lungs in a painful rush, as if she'd been punched in the gut. It couldn't be. It was a nightmare. The world couldn't be this small, this cruel. She clicked on the biography. A graduate of Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, completed her cardiology fellowship at the Mayo Clinic, now pursuing a dual specialty, pioneering new research connecting cardiovascular health with fibrotic lung conditions. It was her, the woman from the plane, the woman whose life she had tried to tear apart, was by a sickening twist of fate the one person in the world who held her mother's life in her hands. The irony was so profound, so devastating, it was almost biblical. For months, she had seen Evelyn Reed as a caricature, an abstract representation of her grievances. Now suddenly, Evelyn was terrifyingly real a person, with a career, a specialty, a position of immense power. The power to grant life, the power to deny it. Karen Miller slumped over the kitchen table and let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. The first stage of her karma had been public humiliation and financial ruin. She was about to discover that the second stage would be far, far worse, a reckoning with her own humanity or lack thereof. The knowledge that Dr. Evelyn Reed held her mother's fate in her hands gnawed at Karen for days. She was trapped in a prison of her own making. To reach out for help would be to crawl on her hands and knees to the woman she had assaulted, an act of supplication, so humiliating it felt impossible. To do nothing meant watching her mother fade away. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuit was proceeding. David Chen, the lawyer from the flight, had connected with Evelyn's legal team and was providing his witness testimony. As part of the discovery process, Evelyn's lawyers were doing a deep dive into every aspect of Karen Miller's life, including her financial and family situation. It was a young, sharp-eyed paralegal who first made the connection. While reviewing Karen's mother's medical records to assess financial hardship claims, she saw the name of the specialist group and the notes about the denied experimental treatment. She cross-referenced it with Dr. Reed's professional affiliations. She blinked, read it again, and then walked briskly into the lead attorney's office. "You're not going to believe this," she said, placing the files on the desk. The information was relayed to Marcus Thorne first. He sat in his office listening impassively as the lawyer explained the incredible cosmic coincidence. When the lawyer was finished, Marcus was silent for a long time. "Does my wife know about this?" he finally asked. "Not yet," the lawyer replied. "We felt you should be informed first. It's a delicate situation." "Tell her," Marcus said simply. "It's her decision to make." That evening, in the warmth of their beautiful home, with their newborn son Michael, sleeping peacefully in a bassinet nearby, Evelyn's lawyer laid out the situation. Evelyn listened, her expression unreadable, her hand gently rocking the bassinet. The angry welt on her cheek had long since faded, but the memory of the humiliation remained. When the lawyer left, she sat in the quiet living room, the city lights twinkling outside. She had imagined many outcomes for Karen Miller: prison time, financial ruin, public disgrace. She had never in her wildest dreams imagined this. She had never imagined that the universe would hand her such absolute and total power over the woman who had hurt her. She could do nothing. She could let the system run its course. Karen's mother would be denied the treatment and justice, or something that looked like it would be served. Karen would suffer, losing the most important person in her life, a pain far deeper than any court-ordered penalty. It would be a perfectly balanced eye-for-an-eye karmic conclusion. But as she looked down at her sleeping son, a wave of something other than anger washed over her. She thought about Eleanor Miller, a woman she had never met, gasping for breath in a small house in New Jersey, her only crime being that her daughter was a hateful person. What had Eleanor done to deserve a death sentence? The core of her being, the part of her that had taken the Hippocratic oath, rebelled against the idea of inaction. She was a doctor, a healer. Her life was dedicated to fighting disease and alleviating suffering, not standing by and watching it happen no matter who the patient was related to. The next morning, she made a phone call, not to Karen, but to her own former mentor and the head of the department, Dr. Peterson. Dr. Peterson, she began, her voice calm and professional. I'm calling about a prospective patient for the new fibrosis trial. Her name is Eleanor Miller. 2 weeks later, Karen sat with her mother in the hushed, intimidating waiting room of the Advanced Lung Disease Program at New York Presbyterian. They had received a call out of the blue. A slot had unexpectedly opened up in the new clinical trial. All costs would be covered by the research grant. It was a miracle. Karen felt a sliver of hope for the first time in months. She was filling out a complex medical history form when a doctor in a long white coat entered the room. He was older, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. "Eleanor Miller?" he asked, his voice warm. "Yes," Karen said, standing up. "I'm Dr. Peterson, the head of the program," he said, shaking Eleanor's frail hand. "I'm so glad we were able to get you in so quickly. We have you scheduled to start treatment next week." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. We were so worried." "Well," Dr. Peterson said with a smile, "you have someone very special to thank for that. The director of this trial, my most brilliant colleague, personally flagged your case and insisted we find a place for you. She's a remarkable physician and an even better human being. An absolute advocate for her patients." He gestured toward a wall of framed photographs showcasing the department's leading doctors. His finger pointed to a photo in the center. It was the same smiling, confident face from the hospital website. "That's her," Dr. Peterson said proudly. "Dr. Evelyn Reed. You're a very lucky woman, Eleanor. Dr. Reed personally ensured you got this spot." The blood drained from Karen's face. The pen fell from her numb fingers and clattered onto the floor. It wasn't an anonymous miracle. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a choice, an act of grace. The woman she had assaulted, humiliated, and dehumanized had reached back through the veil of their shared trauma and saved her mother's life. She hadn't done it with fanfare or for recognition. She had done it quietly, professionally, because it was the right thing to do. Because she was a healer. In that moment, Karen Miller's entire worldview shattered. The elaborate scaffolding of her rage, her self-pity and her prejudice collapsed, leaving her exposed and ashamed. The karma wasn't the lawsuit. It wasn't the public shaming or the financial ruin. The true hard karma was this: she would have to live for the rest of her life with the unbearable knowledge that her mother was alive because of the boundless compassion of the woman she had hated for no reason at all. It was a debt she could never repay, a verdict of mercy that was more damning than any punishment. Her criminal case ended with a plea bargain, probation, and mandatory anti-bias counseling. The civil suit was settled out of court. Marcus and Evelyn accepted a symbolic $1 payment from Karen herself. The bulk of the settlement was a multi-million-dollar donation from Orion Air, mandated by its owner, to a charitable fund that provided support for underserved pregnant women of color. Karen Miller was never seen or heard from again in the aviation world. She lived a quiet, anonymous life, caring for her mother, haunted not by what she had lost, but by the kindness she had never deserved. This story is a stark reminder that our actions born from prejudice and anger can have consequences we could never possibly imagine. Karen Miller's slap was more than an act of violence. It was a failure of humanity. But the true power of this story isn't just in the hard karma she received, but in the profound grace shown by Dr. Evelyn Reed. She had the power to destroy, but she chose to heal. She proved that the greatest victory over hate isn't revenge, but a stubborn, radical refusal to let that hate extinguish your own compassion. What do you think, was this the ultimate karma, or would you have made a different choice in Evelyn's shoes. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the hidden biases in the world and the quiet power of doing the right thing, please help us share it. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where karma delivers its final unexpected verdict, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you for listening.